Welcome back to A Time to Think. Pastor Christopher Tillman, Pastor Josh Holland.
Joshua Holland.
Joshua. Yeah,
You
if
use
you're
my full name, you get to use
if you're
yours.
Christopher, I'm Joshua,
Yeah.
and we both are Carl.
Carl. Yeah.
So A Time to Think with two Carls. Um, we're on this series, Chris, called Media Diet, and a lot of it we're talking about how we're consuming media. And I guess I'll say at the outset, um, if you're violating any of the principles we've already shared, then stop listening to our podcast until you know. What I mean is, um, we've talked about the trivial versus the significant. One of them being that we can even intake significant
Mm-hmm.
things in a way that we're just like filling time. We're just
Yeah.
so if you're doing that with our podcast, like chill out a little bit. If you have so much coming at you that you can't drive for 15 minutes in the car in silence, like maybe take a week off of listening to the podcast. If we talked about entertaining versus informing. Actually, so this is something, Chris, that I'm actively trying to not do. Is like,
Be entertaining.
yeah, mostly in like, I mean, we have the same set that we've had since we started.
Which is the stage of our Wausau building.
So it's the resources we already have.
Yep.
And we have a pretty slick graphic, I think, but just trying to push back against the idea that we need to get cleaner and cooler and newer and
The roller coasters will come later.
just.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
The roller coasters will come later.
Tell me more.
There's comedians in cars getting coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we can go
Dude.
on roller coasters.
That would be my nightmare. I do not like roller coasters.
Do I actually? But it'd be entertaining. That's probably why it'd be entertaining.
So the set is kind of like hey, this is just us using the stuff we have laying around because we think the content is primary. We don't think the entertainment value.
That's code word for we don't care.
Now that we've gotten all that out of the way, our third episode of the Media Diet, we're setting up these kind of opposing ideas like a boxing match. We've talked about trivial versus significant, entertaining versus informing, and now we're talking about disagreeing versus discourse. And Chris, we do not have a society that's good at discourse.
Really?
Define the difference there between
Wow.
between what we mean with disagreement versus discourse.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly a facetious, really, simply because I think there's, over the past, 6 years or so, it's probably been pretty evident to any human being who's alive in Western culture that
It's not evident to people who aren't alive.
Who are dead, yes, although
not
they
that
may
clear.
have voted in the 2020
Yeah.
election. But that aside, when it comes to the issue of discourse and disagreement, we certainly exist in an environment in which, and we'll flesh that out in the coming minutes here, but there really is no space to have substantive dialogue. There is no space to have substantive discussion. It's typically entrenched position, and I disagree with this position, and I simply disagree with it. It's a one-way door, and there is no place for that other individual with whom you disagree to come back and challenge that disagreement or to
Right.
provide any place for reasonable compromise over issues. Nothing is compromisable. Everything is entrenched, hard and fast. This is the way that it is. If you don't like it, you are wrong. Not just you are wrong, but then you are wrong as a human being. You should be discarded, and that's where it goes.
Yeah, it flows really like a lot of logical entailments all the
Yeah.
way to I don't have to listen to you at all.
Exactly.
And I think you see that in the way we pursue information. We pursue information from sources that we already believe are going to agree with us. And if we don't, then we're reading another source waiting for when we disagree. And so we see this, I think that even bleeds into our relationships where because we're not seeing discourse dialogue, like you said, the ability to exchange ideas and shape each other and give and take, we're not seeing that, so we're not trained to do it. And then that actually bleeds into our conversations where I will hear Chris say something, and then I might assume I know what he's saying because I disagree with it, and then I'll disagree, and there's a strong chance that I actually have misunderstood Chris. And
Most likely, yeah.
But in a discourse, one thing I might do is say, Chris, could you clarify what you said? That way, at least, I know if I actually disagree with you, rather than just, I'm charged right now, and I'm ready to disagree with you. I think one of the things that has led to this when we when we're trying to analyze the media landscape is the brevity, the shortness of the media that we read.
Yeah.
So think about it. I wrote this, just some quick math this morning. If you take a 300-page book, books tend to cover one topic, right? They're supposed to be, it's a book on World War I history, or it's a book on the military strategy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's covering one thing. Let's say it's 300 pages. An average reader, a 300-page book is going to take 9 to 11 hours. Which means if you're with that one topic, you're going to be with that one topic for 9 to 11 hours, and you're most likely not doing that on 1 or even 2 days. You're probably spreading those 11 hours over the course of 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks.
Sure.
So now you are listening to one person, or you're reading one person talk about one topic from their one perspective for 3 weeks, essentially. That is a considerable amount of time to start considering what they're saying. It's also a considerable amount of time for them to raise and address follow-up questions,
Right.
and to give time to another viewpoint. And so just the length of the text does something to you.
Right.
Contrast that to what most of us read most of our days, which are articles that take 5 to 7 minutes tops. And even when we read those articles, we're skimming them.
Right.
And so there's just a vast chasm between reading a book about, even if something like politics, versus reading an article. The book forces you to consider and reconsider. The article does not.
And the idea of nuance exists within books, in part because you have space for that nuance to exist. And within, what was the original Twitter, 144 characters? Is that what it was? And I think, didn't they expand it then at some point beyond 144?
I think is it 280 now? Did
I
they
think it
double
might be. Yeah, I think it was close to doubling. And so,
and still, the most engaging things I find on Twitter are like
links to
30 tweet threads.
Right, exactly.
And they're annoying to read, but it's like, okay, well, I mean, at least you're saying something of substance.
Right, exactly. So, I think we do crave nuance. We crave the information itself. We've just become so lazy that we'll just kind of, sounds good, because we've become used to getting information that way, that to actually do the work of reading a book. I mean, I remember watching a video, a guy named Mark Dice, who does some, pretty spot on political commentary, as well as some pretty engaging, humorous videos about the state of culture. And he just went around asking people, when was the last time you read a book? And the vast majority of these grown adults said, like, maybe in high school. And if that doesn't speak to you right there, as far as the willingness to intellectually engage topics among people in our culture, I think you'd probably find the same response most anywhere.
Yeah, but if I asked you when's the last time you read an article,
Exactly.
and we go back to some of the discussions we've had previously, articles are easier.
Yeah.
And there's a degree to which articles are. I mean, it takes years to write a book. The publishing process, you're talking about having an idea and then writing it and then publishing it, minimum 4 years. And a lot of the times, at least in Christian circles, those books are actually written from speaking series.
Sure.
So you might have done the work 10 years ago, and now you're writing the book based on content you already had that now you're editing.
Sure.
These are long processes. Whereas articles are better at hitting current things quickly,
And
right?
there's nothing wrong with them per se.
No, but if the only media that we're intaking are tweets and articles, then we're not learning how to thoughtfully engage with anybody. Tell me more about the nuance, because I think that's a huge part of this, is the space that a longer work is able to give to the opposing viewpoint.
Yeah, I run the risk of just going back to the old man type of statements here.
That's why we have you here, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. When I was in school, when I was in college, my undergraduate work was done in government. So political science, public administration, those two areas. And I learned from liberal professors. No apologies on their part, and they didn't need to make apologies, but no apologies on their part for their political viewpoint. But even from their political viewpoint, the fact that we had a semester-long course on a particular issue. So, I mean, I had one of my advisors, really great guy named Ed Miller, disagree with him on policy issues and everything. Fantastic teacher.
Wait, hold on. So someone can be a good guy and you disagree with him?
Yeah, believe it or not. Mark the day. you know, disagree on a lot of different issues, but very, very bright man and very good at communicating as a teacher ideas. But over the course of that, I think a whole semester we did, it was on education policy, an entire semester on education policy. And so this entire semester, we're forced to think through issues of education policy. And he knew full well that he had conservative students in his
Mm-hmm.
class. And so he's probably not going to persuade us of an opinion, because good teachers in that setting don't necessarily want to persuade you of an opinion unless they're outright telling you, we're going to persuade you of this opinion. It's just, we want you to think through a topic,
Mm-hmm.
want you to make reasonable efforts to come to conclusions and have those conclusions reasonably, stated and supported.
Right.
An entire
And then the
semester.
writing process, if you have to write a paper, is so
Exactly.
that you can observe more opinions, and then you can give them credence, and then you can
Yes.
analyze them, and then maybe you say yes or no.
Yeah. Yeah. And even probably the most liberal professor I had in my entire time undergraduate work
And
was.
you're saying that, just so I'm clear, because you're coming from a conservative
Yeah.
policy
Yeah.
perspective, so there's a disagreement there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was people in the political science department sometimes refer to me as Alex P. Keaton. If you've ever seen the show Family Ties,
Mm-mm.
Michael J. Fox, it was his show. It was his kind of breakout show before Back to the Future, and he was this conservative in a world of liberals. His family, the school, everything like that, and so he was this token conservative. I
So
get
you were
referred to like that.
ideologically at odds with most people
Oh
when you
yeah,
were in the. Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. Students and professors alike. But I was respected. I was respected because I would like to think that I had thoughtful
Mm-hmm.
arguments in support of my position, and I would not disrespect those with whom I had disagreement. And part of that is simply because the nature of education, at least historically, has been providing a platform for people to explore nuances
Mm-hmm.
and to make reasonable cases for their position. That's shifted now, and I think in the world of education, this is a completely different topic that we can, address at another point in time. But I think in the world of education now, it has become so dogmatic in its communication that teachers teach from an ethical perspective, not just an educational perspective. So teachers believe that it is their moral responsibility to communicate doctrine to students.
Mm-hmm.
So for us in our role, we communicate doctrine. That's our job, is to communicate doctrine. Professors
Yeah.
historically have not been given that responsibility, that charge. And so they're communicating doctrinally, you should believe this for this moral reason. And man, even the most liberal professor that I had back in like 2002 was a woman who, I mean, she handled things a whole lot differently than I would have liked. But at the end of the day, she was respectful of different opinions, and she was willing. Literally, I mean, this is like a classroom environment where she would have us sit in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is circle sitting, discussing, not teacher up front, us
Right.
learning, sitting in a circle. We'd all talk about our ideas and opinions and everything, but she was still respectful enough to the fact that different opinions in this process, at least this point in history, you could have a reasonable view because you had space to communicate nuance.
Yeah.
We just don't have that anymore, and it's not just that we don't have that space anymore by virtue of the media that occupies it, but we've discarded it because we think that it's irrelevant, simply because we don't believe that discourse is a relevant part of this process
Mm-hmm.
anymore. We believe that disagreement is the space, and so you have to, like, butt heads with somebody to prove that you're right, and that's it.
Well, you mentioned something, and I think someone commented on the 2016 election years ago and said that the the shift from pre 2016 to 2016 and then 2020 was not it was, are you right about this or are you wrong about this? And then it became, you are moral or immoral.
Right.
So in 2016 and around that time, if you're a Democrat, you're looking at the conservative party and not saying you're wrong, you're saying you're immoral,
Right.
and vice versa. And we've talked about this in our discussions of tolerance and bigotry. Once you label someone as immorally wrong, you don't have discourse with them.
Right.
Now, I think there are people that have morally wrong positions, but if I go so far as to say they are so morally bankrupt we can't even have a discussion
And
about
they
it,
should be eliminated from the conversation.
then there's no motivation for me to talk.
Right.
And so then you have this steady removal of any type of marketplace ideas type of thing,
Right.
or any type of engagement where you might say, Chris, you and I have a different position on abortion. I'm going to spend 45 minutes asking you questions.
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that the media culture kills is curiosity.
Right.
And because when you're in school and you're getting taught to write papers, what you have to do is you read through books and you read through articles, and you're first seeking to paraphrase an argument.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeking to say, what is this author saying? Why are they saying it? You have questions formed in your head,
Right.
and you wait to see if they answer those questions. And if not, you have these lingering questions, and you
Mm-hmm.
might say, what the author didn't do is
Mm-hmm.
address this, this, and this.
Yep.
In the same way, when we're having conversations, what happens is like we play conversational tennis to
Mm-hmm.
some degree, where you say something and I disagree, and then you disagree with my
Right.
disagreement, and I disagree back, and we don't. I don't know what the other sport analogy would be, but we don't sit and say, Chris, can you clarify? Like I'm hearing that you're like in your position on sexuality, you're saying that we got to honor and give dignity to human beings, but in your position on abortion,
Mm.
you're removing that dignity from human.
Right.
Could you actually explain to me how you rationalize
Right.
those two concepts together? That's a form of discourse where I mean, if I'm being tactful, I'm trying to show you the fallacy, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also trying to bring you into the conversation to
Right.
say, I'm hearing two different things, man.
Right.
Could you keep talking?
Yeah.
And I think the way that most and I keep addressing articles because I think they are the biggest form of like if you have 600 words, basically you say, this is what happened, here's what you should believe about it, here's who we're against, they think this, they're wrong, end of article.
Right.
There is no space in there to say, here's why
Right.
they think this.
Yep.
And so then it leads me and you to have those types of conversations
Right.
where I'm just like, Chris is wrong.
Yeah. That's a sad conversation.
How do we fix that?
How do you fix it?
Particularly in the church, how do we fix that?
Man, well, I think the and I was going to say something really cheesy, but I would say awareness of this reality needs to be present. I I do think, and I don't have a crusade against social media. I really don't want to come across as having that, but I do see the impact that it has on people, and I've been removed from social media, at least personally being involved with it for a handful of years now. I'll check out Twitter threads just
For
without
fantasy football memes.
yeah, mostly for fantasy football without an account because you can still do that and everything. But I do think it's important for Christian people to understand just how much you're being impacted by ways of looking at life that discard any sense of nuance. And I think it's very critical that Christian people are willing to do this, because if the church is unwilling to do this and set a tone for expressing dignity and worth when we're having conversations about things, then we should just cash it in. And so when it comes to issues of like social media, um, just imagine the emotions if you scroll 3 times, get past your ads that you might encounter. You hear somebody talk about their grandmother who died. Another person says, I just got a new puppy. Another person shows you a picture of their gluten-free vegan supper they had last night at an Indian restaurant.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, well,
Mostly just because I don't think we have any
to
Indian
some
restaurants
people,
up here.
right? And then somebody else provides some type of political analysis. Each one of those is intended by an individual to elicit a response. That's why you have a like button.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants a response. Nobody is going to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram to be on their own.
Yeah.
You're going into a place where you want people to respond to you. And so you acknowledge the fact that that's what you're doing when you post. But even more than that, when you scroll, you are being marketed to by people that you know. And it's kind of a strange way to look at it, but I think if you just understand, it's marketing is people trying to get your attention for the purpose of action, of a response. Marketing happens to typically take shape in a financial outcome. So it's, you like this, buy this product. That's the response. It's not just we want you to like this. We want you to like this enough that you give us money. In the case of social media, in the most proper form, what you're doing is you're communicating something so that somebody responds to you in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody responds to you favorably, I don't think at this point there's a thumbs down on
There's
on
like an
Facebook.
angry face.
Angry face,
Yeah.
right? Angry face, but that's still emotional. Even you look at like YouTube. YouTube removed the thumbs down button.
Really?
It used to be there.
Finally,
YouTube,
all those emails I sent them.
yeah, exactly. YouTube removed that, and so now there's simply it's the amount of likes that something has is representative of the total, the sum total of likes and dislikes, but they don't want anybody to see a dislike. They don't want to see a thumbs down on it. And so the response that's always being called for is to say, we want you to feel, and then we want you to act. We're creating emotional schizophrenics, and we are receiving a malady, a disorder from our unthinking consumption. Best way to put it, I'm trying to be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Our unthinking consumption of social media, because we are responding to things in a way that is showing that we are so engaged by others without us thinking about the fact that we're being engaged. We're so engaged with them that through the flick of your thumb on your phone screen.
Can I clarify? You're
Yeah.
saying that when someone posts something on Facebook and I read it, like I'm being engaged by them and
You are
I
being
don't know it.
engaged and you don't realize it. You simply think that you are keeping up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm keeping up with what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm keeping up with what's going on.
But it's like clear when someone who you went to high school with that you don't actually need to keep up with posts an opposing political view about something,
Yes.
and you're mad.
Yes.
And you're like, you've allowed someone who you have really no relationship with to anger you.
Yes, exactly.
Because they've engaged you.
Exactly, they've engaged you. And so we can see through it with advertising. It's like, oh, there's Maurice's again trying to advertise this thing to my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Oh, yeah, obviously they're trying to
Yeah.
get something. Do you not think that when somebody is putting out their thoughts on a matter in this limited space, that they're not looking for a response?
Mm-hmm.
And the response that's going to be called for is not a response then of nuanced discussion, because you don't have time to do this paragraphs on paragraphs. You have time simply to angry face it, or you have time simply to say, I think you're wrong, and then link to an article somewhere, instead of saying, hey, so-and-so, mind sitting down and talking about this?
Right.
Because most of the time, these are not people you can even sit down and talk with, simply because they're not around
It's an
you.
illusion. Like you might think you're doing something that you're not doing. You're reading and reacting for the
Right.
most part. And I mean, there's a possibility to engage in a meaningful way, but I think you have to have two people that are so self-controlled and
Right.
so, I guess, charitable to one another. Like you have to actively have two responsible, mature, self-controlled people in order to have a chance for meaningful discourse on social media, because there's so many ways that you can't read body language there, you can't read tone, you can't. It's harder to ask clarifying questions. You might ask a question and then 5 hours later get a response. You could be in a totally different mood when you get the response. It's not impossible, but it's improbable.
Right.
And so you're really in a world of visceral reaction, and I think that's, if we're honest with ourselves, most of the content we consume, we're in a world of visceral reaction rather than in a world of meaningful discourse, this engagement, this exchange of ideas, this asking of clarifying questions.
So for the Christian person, then, to just be aware of that fact, to be aware when you're going on your phone and you're sitting down, flick, 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 flick.
When you're trying to like get to the trivial, right? Like, oh, I had a tough day.
Exactly.
I just want to.
Yeah.
But you're engaging in a world that is affecting you.
And it's because people think what they have, like, not to diminish, but people think what they have to say is significant. Nobody's going to put a trivial thing out there, even though it may be trivial. I think it's completely trivial for somebody to put a picture of what they made for dinner last night on social media. Sorry if that's you, but I just think it's kind of a ridiculous enterprise.
So is fantasy football memes, to be fair.
Well,
You just enjoy one of them.
But here's the thing. Here's I'll defend myself.
Self-justifying behavior, guys.
It's self-justifying, yeah. I share that with people that I know care about it.
Yeah.
I don't try to persuade other people You should care about
Yeah.
this. So when somebody goes on social media and they've got 700 people that could potentially see this, and they say, you should respond to this,
Mm-hmm.
they are thinking it's significant. And by virtue of the fact that it's showing up on your feed, a company thinks it's significant. And the only space you have is a few seconds of internal response and then a call for a response that says, I will emote this,
Yeah.
or I will respond with a few sentences. And that's kind of where we're at. And for Christian people to understand, you are being manipulated if you are, like, going back to something you said a couple episodes ago.
Thanks
If
for listening, Chris.
I am listening, yeah. In part because those couple episodes were just, an hour ago or so in real time. But if you don't understand that you have potential to be used by something, like, we all think that we're using it, but are you really? Are you really using it, or is it using you?
You think you're using it until your wife points out that you've been on your phone all day, and
Yeah,
you're like, it's not been all day, I just picked it up.
exactly.
And you realize, oh.
I guess I have been, right?
So you're calling the Christian to recognize the environment they're entering into. So
Yeah.
you think about it, think about media, whether it's television or blogs or social media. Think about it like a room that has a smell and a temperature, and
It's a
you are
great
going
picture.
into the room.
Yeah.
And you got to know, like, some of us are more prone to sadness and despair, some of us are more prone to anger, some of us are more prone to jealousy, what the
Yeah.
Bible would call coveting, and sometimes we're willingly entering into a room that's going to make us mad.
It's not neutral.
We're willingly entering into it. We're like, we hate that smell, but I'm gonna go in there.
Yep.
So we have to. You're wanting us to know that. That's good. I think we also need to know how that affects our relationships outside of those realms, because particularly in the church, we're gonna be on guard, Chris, if we are only taught to wait until I disagree with Chris.
Yep.
And this is a sin of mine. Is I can sometimes find it hard to even nod in agreement with what someone's saying until they finish their sentence.
Sure.
Like, because I need to know that they're going to finish it in a way that I agree. I can sense in myself, like, sometimes it's hard for me to meaningfully engage with people because I'm waiting for where I disagree with them rather than seeing where I do agree with them. And particularly in the church, it has become easy in the past 3 years to start to go, okay, who are the people that I disagree with on racial justice issues? Who are the people that I disagreed with on mask issues and government obedience? Who are the people that I disagree with on, let's just say those two, just for example. And so what we do is we start to guard ourselves, and we don't meaningfully engage with those people because we don't honestly love them. And Christ, one, calls us to meaningfully love people who are vastly different than us, which means I have to have a heart posture that maybe when I'm reading an article about the political sphere, like, I'm going, I disagree with that person. But when I'm in the church, I actually have a person there who has been saved and redeemed by the blood of Christ and is in my family. And so I think that's one. Two is there are probably going to be many relationships in which you have to step back and say, can we remind ourselves what we agree on? Okay, so you and I are clear that Christ is Lord. Okay, you and I are clear that Christ's blood and blood alone can save sinners. Okay, so you and I are clear that can we write those things down? Because I feel like I'm actually feeling opposed to you right now, but I know that, and that's what Christian unity is, Chris. Christian unity is not this vague, like, paper over differences because they don't matter. It's focus on the unifying principle of Christ to such a degree that your arms are still together even when it feels like the other one is punching you. You know? And I think we have to guard ourselves as Christians of not looking around the church and finding, I disagree with that person, I disagree with that person, I disagree with that person, but rather move towards people, all the while remembering that Christ had a great disagreement with us as we set ourselves up against him as his enemy, and he moved towards us. So that's just a reflection on, I think, how the church can respond to this opposition culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris, always value your thoughts. You think about things in a different lens, and even though we have such similarities in maybe different categories, like we believe similar theologically, we often believe similarly in socially, and yet still your perspective comes in a different way than mine does. And
my advanced age.
You're not that old. Stan Kelderman's probably listening to this going, shut up, Chris. Stan, you're perfect, by the way. You're in your prime. Thanks, Chris, and thank you for taking some time to think.
Thank you.